Welcome to this retrospective slash review for the video game Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride. Specifically, the version I played was the DS version of the game, which for all intents and purposes is the one that is currently available for people to purchase. But if you want to actually get this game, it's only available on a mobile device like an iPhone or Android device, basically. So it's not very readily available outside of those platforms. So that's why I went ahead and emulated the DS version. But that's just basically a bit of a brief backstory as to the version that is available here. Hopefully, Square will actually, or Square Enix will actually, make it a little more readily available to the rest of us who don't want to play a game like this on a mobile device, because I honestly couldn't even begin to see myself playing this particular RPG on a mobile device. It just wouldn't be something that I would do. But one of the things you'll see here is I made a background video. I restored one of my old saves, and I went back and this time married a different uh, one of the options. So instead of marrying Bianca for this one, I decided to marry Deborah. And so just a little bit of differences, as you will see in the background here. Uh, Mostly because I wanted to get a specific achievement for this, and to do that I had to either marry Deborah or Nira. So there'll be a little bit of difference from when I did my initial playthrough, basically. So something to look at if you want to see how things shake out, as it were, if you decide to marry Deborah. Anyway, that being aside, I will say, as far as Dragon Quest games are concerned, I've played Dragon Quest 1 through 4, mostly the NES versions of all of those, though I did play Dragon Quest 4, the DS version. I did an inject on my Wii U, so I played it that way, and it wasn't really a good way of playing it because of the way the screens were set up. Basically, the touchpad or the gamepad was the main screen that had everything, basically. So wasn't a great experience, and I will say that emulating uh, this particular game this way was much more enjoyable of an experience, to say the least. And also the reason why I decided to do Dragon Quest V now, because it's one I haven't played, is also I try to kind of put it and Final Fantasy V, play them fairly close to each other, so I can kind of compare and contrast the two uh, games. Because back in the day, those two were kind of rival series for the most part, and it a very good comparison to how things were being done. And I can say that these two games are, Final Fantasy V and Dragon Quest V are vastly different from each other for certain. And I guess this is where you could really start to see the split in direction for the two franchises for certain. Um, it's also a little bit ironic that them being such big rivals back in the day, that they ended up merging to form a singular company, Square Enix, now. So I find that doubly ironic at the same token. But anyway, um, I will say that it's been a while since I played a Dragon Quest game, so I do want to go ahead and make that distinction. It has been quite a few years since I played one, and this game was, was pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by playing the game. I mean, just the graphical, animations and the quality of the graphics was actually very good. I thought it was going to be probably not as great because it was on a DS, which for all intents and purposes is kind of like a stripped down N64. But no, I think the graphics hold up really well, and of course the music is just iconic. It has that Dragon Quest feel to the music, so it just, from a musical perspective, very iconic sound effects, the traditional Dragon Quest kind of sound. So this game definitely has a very traditional flavor to it, as it were. It's one of those things, like every time you fire up a Dragon Quest game, you kind of have an idea of how the game is going to feel. And this game definitely continues to, um, stick with that standard basically. So yeah, from a graphics and sound perspective, I was very pleased with the game. Um, Obviously I wasn't expecting the sound to be bad, but I was surprised with the graphics. Control, I mean, it's just a turn-based RPG, so it's not like you have a lot of problems with the controls, really, as it were. But controlled well as well. But the storyline, it definitely had the light-hearted tone that you come to expect from a Dragon Quest game, for the most part. And I say for the most part because the way the first two chapters of this game ended, they ended on pretty dark tones, at least from what I'm used to seeing in a Dragon Quest game. Very dark tones the way they ended, like you being put into slavery at the end of the childhood era, as it were, which was definitely not something you would see too often in some of the other Dragon Quest games. So I'm not going to say that it kept that tone. I don't want to say this is a dark game because obviously it's not a dark game. It does have that light-hearted tone throughout most of the game. But, it for a Dragon Quest game, it was a bit of a surprise to see some of those dark undertones for some sections of the game. But overall, the tone of the game still remains fairly lighthearted. So I was pleased with that as well. Um, I would definitely say from a story perspective and actually from a gameplay perspective, pretty much everything so far, this is probably going to be my favorite Dragon Quest game. But to be fair, I've only played like 5 Dragon Quest games and also Dragon Quest Heroes. So we'll see what some of the other games, when I get to them, how I feel about them. But this one so far definitely, I will say, is probably my favorite of the Dragon Quest games. Um, there's a lot of stuff going on here in this game. Uh, Now, also from the dark undertones thing, I will say that I think there was a bit of darkness to the beginning of the final chapter for Dragon Quest IV, but for the most part, I'd say that there was more dark undertones here with this game, basically with how the first 2 chapters, as it were, ended. But still fairly lighthearted. And the story, it's not, I don't want to say it's a bare bones story because it really isn't. There's a lot more going on in this than a lot of the early Dragon Quest games, for certain. But it's not, there's not a huge amount of twists and turns, I guess. But there's enough to make it so that it's a pretty good story. But I'm not going to say it's the greatest story I've ever seen in any video game because that would just be, dishonest. But as far as the Dragon Quest games go, I think it is a good story and something that is, it's worth experiencing. And for, players who have played other Dragon Quest games, there might be some surprises there that you wouldn't expect from a Dragon Quest game. So from that perspective, it's a good story, but nothing super earth-shattering. But it's also not very simplistic either. So I do want to point that out. One of the things I think with this game that I've noticed from my personal view is there's a lot of side quest stuff going on here with the Knick-Knackatory, getting all the different little knickknacks for that. The monster hunting stuff, which this game originally, back I believe in 92 is when it came out in Japan. So this definitely predated Pokemon by quite a while. And so the monster hunting aspect of the game is another very big side quest portion to consider here. And of course, for me, because I emulated it, I linked it up with my Retro Achievements account so I could grab achievements. So that really does unlock a very big realm of possibilities for things for you to do in this game, to say the least. There's the TNT boards. There's all the gambling stuff. There's the Tombola game, which I haven't even played. I've got like 20-something Tombola tickets. I haven't even played it yet. That's beside the point. So they're from a unnecessary content perspective or side quest content. There's a lot of stuff going on, but at the same time, it can be a little bit frustrating with some of it. So, for instance, the one of the side quests, side contents that I've had the most experience with right now is the monster hunting. And monster hunting is it can be a little bit on the frustrating side also, because there's a very fixed percentage chance that you can get a monster. And for some of them, the chance is just very, very low. And they also have a very low spawn rate in certain places. So that just kind of adds to the frustration. It's like, look, for me, just finding the monster is a pain in the rear end. And then now I've got to deal with this low recruitment rate on top of it. So that's a bit annoying. The gambling aspect of the game. So for you to get like the Metal King, or is it Metal King Slime Sword? Whatever, Metal King Sword basically, or even the best whip slash flail for Bianca or your daughter, that requires a lot of gambling, to say the least. And yes, there's a lot of different types of gambling games, but you're literally just sitting there for a couple of hours trying to get enough tokens to get these items. And from a side quest perspective, that's a little bit more annoying, because at least if I'm going out there monster hunting, despite the low recruitment rate, I'm still getting XP, I'm still getting money, I'm still getting something for it. Whereas gambling, it's a time waste. That's all it is a time waste. And it's a time waste specifically to get some of the best equipment in the game. So, not my favorite aspect of this game. And to be completely and totally fair, this game, like all Dragon Quest games I've played so far, there's a lot of grinding involved. So if you're not a fan of doing level grinding, gold farming, things of that nature, you're probably not going to be a big fan of this game. I have a lot more time in this game than I do in, say, Final Fantasy V right now. And a lot of that is just due to the grind, for lack of a better word. Now, personally, I'm not opposed to a grind heavy game. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is I'll like put on like videos, YouTube videos or something on another computer, so I can actually have something to listen to while I'm doing the grinding stuff. So that is something to consider. But this game definitely does, even though this is the updated version of Dragon Quest V, it still has those mechanics there that is very much grind heavy for certain. So overall, like I said, it is my favorite Dragon Quest game, and I did enjoy it. And if you compare and contrast it to, say, Final Fantasy V, they're two very different type of games, really. I don't know which one I like better. I mean, they both have their pros and cons. I like the job system in Final Fantasy V. I thought that was really cool. But this game with the monster recruiting and all the other stuff, it does have a different, unique take on things. So I'd say they're probably both about equal, to be honest with you. If you've never gotten around to playing any Dragon Quest game, this is probably a really good starting point to get into the series. I feel, because this is where I mean, Dragon Quest IV is pretty good as well. So I do want to point that out real quick. I was also surprised from a storyline perspective how much this really did tie into Dragon Quest IV. I mean, Dragon Quest IV happened way in the past of this particular game, but the fact that there was a lot of callbacks to that game was something I actually wasn't expecting, and I completely forgot to mention that when I was talking about the story. So the fact that this does tie in with Dragon Quest IV, maybe it's not the best starting point. Maybe you'd rather start with Dragon Quest IV and then try this one out. But I did like this game. I think it's a good Dragon Quest game. So either this one or Dragon Quest IV would probably be a good entry point for someone who's wanting to get into the Dragon Quest series. The only issue is availability. And availability is not great at the present time. Like I said, it's only on mobile platforms. So if you want to support the developers, you can buy them on the mobile platform and then emulate it like I did. But ideally, hopefully, Square Enix will come out with a official release on all platforms. The platforms that, honestly, the ones that really matter. And it's not a dig against mobile platforms. I mean, okay, maybe it is. But it really does need to be on console and PC. Just my personal preference there. But anyway, as far as a score for this game, I'd say probably just like Final Fantasy V, I'll give it a 90%. There are a lot of mechanics that would probably be off-putting to certain people, but I think the charm of the game, the graphics of the game, all that aside, is enough that I think definitely should elevate it up into that fairly upper echelon. And I think a 90 percentile score is good for it. And yeah, I definitely had a very good time playing this game, and I definitely recommend it. Anyway, that's my thoughts for Dragon Quest V. So I thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.